The dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the windows of the Cape Town Archive building as Dr. Sarah Chun, 41, a digital preservation specialist, methodically cataloged boxes of political documents from the 1990s. It was routine work, scanning, digitizing, filing. Most days blended together in the quiet hum of computers and the rustle of aging papers. Today felt different, though. An anonymous donor had left 12 boxes of audio equipment and tapes outside the archive's doors with the simple note, "These belong to my father, a sound engineer during the transition period." I thought they might be important. Sarah had seen hundreds of donations like this, mostly family recordings and outdated equipment that held sentimental value but little historical significance. As Sarah examined an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, she noticed something unusual. One tape was still loaded in the machine, carefully labeled in faded ink. Private session, December 5th, 1999, final recording. The date caught her attention immediately. December 1999 was just months before Mandela stepped down as president, a crucial period in South African history. Her hands trembled slightly as she connected the old machine to her digital converter. The first few minutes were scratchy, filled with technical adjustments and muffled voices. Then, clear as day, came a voice that stopped her cold. "This is Nelson Mandela. Today is December 5th, 1999. What I am about to say, I have never spoken aloud to another human being." Sarah's heart pounded as she listened to the opening words. This wasn't a public speech or an interview. The tone was intimate, almost confessional. She glanced around the empty archive room, suddenly aware of the weight of what she might be hearing. The recording quality was remarkably clear, suggesting professional equipment. Mandela's voice continued, "I asked for this recording session because there are truths I carry that history deserves to know, but that I could never burden my people with while I still breathed among them." Sarah's hands hovered over the pause button. Should she be listening to this? Should she stop and call her supervisor? But something in Mandela's tone held her captive. Sarah had dedicated her career to preserving South African history. Her parents had emigrated from China in the 1960s, and she'd grown up hearing stories of apartheid, of Mandela's imprisonment, of the miracle of peaceful transition. She'd always admired Mandela as the perfect symbol of reconciliation, the man who chose forgiveness over revenge. But lately, she'd struggled with her own faith in humanity. The world seemed more divided than ever, violence erupting everywhere, people choosing hatred over healing. Her own marriage had ended in bitterness. Her teenage daughter barely spoke to her, and she'd begun to wonder if true forgiveness was just a beautiful lie people told themselves. The recording continued for 47 minutes. Mandela spoke of moments during his presidency when he'd wanted to give up, when the weight of expectations nearly crushed him. He talked about nights when he'd wake up screaming from nightmares about his time in prison, how he'd sometimes stare at his former jailers during public events and feel a rage so intense it frightened him. "They expect me to be a saint." His voice cracked. "But I am just a man who learned to bury his anger so deep that sometimes I forget it exists." Sarah found herself crying, hearing the human behind the icon. But it was the final 10 minutes that would change everything. With 8 minutes remaining in the recording, Mandela's voice shifted. It became stronger, more resolved. "But let me tell you what I learned in those darkest moments," he said. "In 1985, during my 21st year of imprisonment, I received news that broke me completely. My youngest grandson had been killed in a car accident, not by apartheid, not by violence, but by simple, cruel fate. I had missed his entire life, and now I would never know him." Sarah's breath caught. This story had never been public. That night, I planned to end my life. I had nothing left to give, no reason to continue fighting. But then something happened that saved not just me, but perhaps our entire country. A young guard named Willem Kruger found me in my cell that night. He was barely 20, the son of a farmer, raised to see me as a terrorist. But when he saw me weeping, something in him broke too. He sat outside my cell for hours, not speaking, just present. Finally, he whispered through the bars, "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Mandela. I lost my baby brother last year, The pain, it never goes away, does it? Mandela's voice grew quiet. In that moment, I realized something that would guide me for the rest of my life. Our pain doesn't divide us, it connects us. That young Afrikaner guard and I, enemies by law, were brothers in grief. And if we could find humanity in each other in that prison cell, then perhaps a nation could heal. Sarah paused the recording, overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed with messages from her ex-husband about their daughter's school event, the same bitter exchanges that had become their routine. She thought about her own grief, her own anger, how she'd let it build walls instead of bridges. The recording had 2 minutes left. With shaking hands, she pressed play. "I need to tell you about that guard, Willem Kruger," Mandela continued. 3 years later, he was killed in a bombing by radical elements who opposed any reconciliation. He died protecting a bus full of black children from an explosion. His last act was pushing them to safety. Willem never lived to see freedom. Mandela's voice filled the silent archive room. But he taught me that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past or pretending evil didn't happen. It's about choosing to see the human in your enemy, even when they can't see it in themselves. Every time I shook hands with my former captors, I was thinking of Willem, the boy who became a man in a moment of shared grief. Sarah wiped her tears, understanding something fundamental about forgiveness she'd never grasped before. It wasn't weakness or naivety. It was the hardest, bravest choice a person could make. The next morning, Sarah sat in her supervisor's office, the recording saved on a secure drive. Dr. Marcus Williams, head of the archive, listened intently as she explained the discovery. His face grew grave. "Sarah, if this is authentic, it changes everything we thought we knew about Mandela's psychology, his decision-making process. But are we sure it's real? And more importantly, do we have the right to release something so personal?" The ethical implications were staggering. Mandela was gone. He couldn't consent to this revelation. His family deserved to hear it first. The political ramifications could be enormous. Word of the recording's existence leaked despite their caution. Within hours, news outlets worldwide were speculating about its contents. The Mandela Foundation demanded access. Political commentators debated whether private thoughts of public figures should ever be revealed. Some called it a violation of privacy. Others argued it was crucial historical evidence. Protests erupted outside the archive, some demanding the recording's release, others calling for its destruction. Sarah found herself at the center of a global controversy, receiving death threats from extremists who feared what Mandela might have said about them. After 2 weeks of legal battles and ethical consultations, the Mandela Foundation, in consultation with his family, made the decision. The recording would be released in full, with no edits or omissions. At a packed press conference in Cape Town, Sarah sat beside Mandela's granddaughter as they played the final minute of the recording for the world. Mandela's voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this after I am gone, know this. The choice between hatred and love is one each person must make every single day. I was not born without anger. I learned to choose love. And if an old prisoner can find forgiveness for his captors, then perhaps there is hope for us all." The response was immediate and profound. The recording went viral within hours, translated into dozens of languages. But it wasn't just the words that moved people. It was hearing the vulnerability behind the icon, the humanity behind the hero. In Belfast, former enemies cited Mandela's words during peace talks. In Jerusalem, a Palestinian mother and Israeli father, who had both lost children, found each other through the story of Willem Kruger. Prison reform advocates around the world used the recording to show how even the most hardened criminals could change. The hashtag Choose Love movement spread across social media, inspiring millions to share their own stories of forgiveness. 6 months after the recording's release, Sarah stood in her apartment, preparing for an awkward dinner. Her ex-husband David and their daughter Emma were coming over, the first time they'd all been in the same room without lawyers present in 2 years. The divorce had been brutal, filled with accusations and bitterness. But something had changed after hearing Mandela's words about Willem Kruger. Sarah had called David, swallowed her pride, and simply said, "I'm tired of being angry. Emma deserves better from both of us." The dinner was tentative, careful, but it was a beginning. A year later, the Nelson Mandela Institute for Reconciliation Studies was established, built around the principles revealed in that final recording. Sarah became its first director, leaving her quiet archive job to help train mediators, counselors, and peacebuilders worldwide. The Institute's motto, taken from the recording, was simple: "Our pain doesn't divide us, it connects us." Former enemies traveled from across the globe to learn how grief could become a bridge instead of a wall. The Willem Kruger Memorial Garden was planted at the Institute, where people could sit quietly and contemplate the power of unexpected human connection. The recording's influence spread beyond individual reconciliation to systemic change. Restorative justice programs cited Mandela's words and policy reforms. Truth and reconciliation commissions in other countries used the recording as a training tool. Most remarkably, prison systems began implementing humanity circles, sessions where guards and inmates could meet as human beings, not just as authority and criminal. The program showed remarkable success in reducing recidivism and violence. What had started as one man's private confession became a blueprint for healing fractured societies. 2 years after the recording's discovery, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at the Institute. An elderly white man, thin and weathered, stood nervously in her office. "My name is Johann Kruger," he said quietly. "Willem was my son." Sarah's breath caught. "I never knew about his conversation with Mr. Mandela until I heard the recording. I wanted to thank you for sharing it. You see, I spent 40 years angry at Willem for betraying our race by protecting those children. But now I understand. He didn't betray anything. He became more human than I ever taught him to be." Johann paused, tears in his eyes. "And if my son could touch the heart of Nelson Mandela in a prison cell, then maybe it's not too late for an old fool like me to learn something too." 5 years after finding the recording, Sarah stood in the same Cape Town archive building where it all began. The room had been transformed into the Mandela Audio Collection, where visitors could listen to not just the famous recording, but hundreds of hours of other historical voices. A young archivist approached her, a former gang member from the townships who'd been inspired by Mandela's story to pursue education and reconciliation work. "Dr. Chun," he said, "we just received another donation. Boxes of recordings from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Should I start digitizing them?" Sarah smiled, thinking of all the stories yet to be discovered, all the truths waiting to heal the world. "Yes," she said, "every voice deserves to be heard." As she walked home that evening, Sarah passed the memorial wall where Willem Kruger's name was etched alongside thousands of others who had chosen love over hatred in small, crucial moments. The recording had revealed something profound, that heroes aren't born. They're made in the quiet moments when ordinary people choose to see the humanity in their enemies. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone is listening when they make that choice, ready to share it with a world that desperately needs to remember how to forgive. The sun set over Cape Town as Sarah reached her apartment, where David and Emma were waiting for their weekly family dinner. Imperfect, sometimes awkward, but real. On her desk sat a new letter from a war veteran in Afghanistan who'd heard the recording and decided to reach out to the family of an enemy soldier he'd killed. "I don't know if forgiveness is possible," he'd written, "but Mandela was right. We have to try. Our pain is all we have in common, but maybe it's enough." Sarah smiled, thinking of a prison cell in 1985, a young guard named Willem, and an old man who chose to turn his deepest grief into the world's greatest lesson. Sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones we whisper in the dark, never knowing who might be listening, never imagining how far those whispers might travel.